Welcome to the Existential Empath Podcast. My name is Tanya, and I am an intuitive empath. My intention is to share valuable tools and techniques that I have learned so you can tap into your own inner healer naturally and intuitively. Welcome back, everyone. Today I have guest Lindsay Miller. Lindsay is a stress recovery and resilience coach with more than 20 years experience in child development study and mindfulness. She hosts the Stress Nanny Podcast and is the creator of the Stress Nanny and Kids Mindfulness Coaching. Her goal at the Stress Nanny is to give parents and kids simple ways to communicate their needs during everyday moments, especially during stressful situations like family conflict, divorce, illness, and loss. Lindsay believes that mindful communication is an essential skill for modern, everyday families, and she helps kids go from frazzled to flourishing. Welcome, Lindsay. It's a pleasure to have you on my show with me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Tanya. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Yeah, so you and I are going to dive into teaching children to overcome stress through mindfulness. So, with families facing epic levels of stress and kids experiencing alarming levels of anxiety, we need more ways to help kids feel safe and happy, right? So let's first off start with Lindsay. How do children show stress? Is it different than adults? And what are some things that parents should pay attention to?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I want to start out by just thinking about stress, like in the context of development. Because if you think about it, I'm 42, right? So I have 42 years of managing stress. I know, like I've been learning different tools. I know what stress feels like. When you say stress, I know exactly what you're talking about. But for kids, it's just like overwhelm, right? Like, they don't even, little kids don't even have the language for stress. And so a lot of times they'll use behavior. So to answer your question, we'll see kids who, just have behavior outbursts. They'll be throwing tantrums. They'll be just extremely emotionally dysregulated, meaning they don't know how to kind of manage all these big feelings that are coming up. And I tend to work with kids who have a high degree of empathy. And so, as empathetic kids, they feel all the things all the time, right? And they're just picking up on everybody's stuff, and they just feel stuff real deep. And so, especially for those kids, what it looks like is, they'll be in complete overwhelm. They'll just be screaming, crying, like hitting stuff. Sometimes with boys, what we see, because we tend to not give boys avenues for expressing anything but anger, it just shows as, manifests as anger. So just like explosive anger, breaking stuff, hurting people or things. Those are all signs, behaviorally, because kids don't always have the words that are saying like, I'm stressed out, I am dysregulated, I don't know what to do. We'll see some kids who will withdraw, some kids who will be really nervous in new situations. One thing that is important for parents to note is like a change in behavior, right? So if your child is usually bubbly, excited about trying new things, there could be a variety of reasons why that might change. But if you've undergone something stressful, or if your child has experienced something stressful, that might change really dramatically. So all of a sudden you have a kid who's maybe like super scared, super, just really hesitant, nervous about going into school on their own. And again, that can be sometimes developmental, right? Because the different stages that they go through can sometimes be, there can be a sense of nervousness. But if you see it consistently for a while, that's usually a sign that like something's going on and we need to dig in. And when we start to give kids the language around stress, they can start to use language to describe what it is. But until we give them kind of the words, it's mostly behavior that we see, that's off.
Yeah. And if you're an empathic parent, then your child is empathic too. So if you're going through stress, your child and your animals too. I want to emphasize that. Everybody in your household's going through stress if you're a family of empaths.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll see, sometimes what we'll see too is like one kid who will just be like the super empath of the family, and everyone will have like a high degree of empathy, but then there'll be the one who will just be like, taking everything on and being attuned to everyone's everything. And that kid is going through, like you're saying, a lot. And so just being attuned to that and recognizing that, like, you again have the language, right? I have the language, but they don't even know what is going on, you know?
Yeah. And I know when I was a child, my parents would call me the sensitive one. And now I know why. It's because I was doing just like you explained. I was, crying, I was lashing out, I was picking up on a lot of the energies because I didn't have the tools or the words, to speak, hey, I'm stressed out. And so it is important to see those nonverbal cues that children are showing us, right? So, Lindsay, your program, Kids Mindfulness Coaching, is all about building emotional intelligence skills like empathy, self-awareness, resilience, and problem solving. Can you talk more about mindfulness, what it is, and some of the research-based benefits behind it?
Yeah, definitely. So I like to describe mindfulness in a really simple way. Again, I work with kids, right? So it's good to break it down. We talk about mindfulness as being knowing what's going on inside of you, knowing what's going on outside of you, and then making a choice on purpose. So in any given moment, being able to tune into, like, what's going on inside me right now? What am I feeling? What are the factors that are influencing my behavior? So am I tired? Am I hungry? I'm feeling really sad. What's going on outside of us? So what the kind of climate in our home is. And for empathetic kids, again, like, what's going on outside of them is just as big as what's going on inside. And so, what is there, conflict in the home right now? Are there, different stressors at school? Are they, supported by solid friendships, or are they feeling kind of drained by the people that they're interacting with? Those kinds of things are the outside things. And then how do we combine that awareness, the knowledge of those two things, to make a choice on purpose, right? Like, to move forward in that moment and say, like, so this is what I need, or this is what I'm going to do. And it sounds really simple, but being able to tune in kind of like just really quickly to those things and get a bearing for them, it's a skill that takes development. But once kids can do it, it's really incredible what they're able to kind of understand about themselves and the world around them, and the way they're able to live with more balance, creativity, flexibility. There's a lot of research that shows that self-awareness, the part of our brain that is practicing self-awareness, doesn't get a ton of exercise unless we are conscious about it. And a lot of times as parents, understandably, we don't give kids a ton of practice with that part of their brain. So it might not be as developed as it could be. But especially for kids with a high degree of empathy, it's super important, right? For that part of their brain to be attuned to, like, that high level view of, like, how am I doing? What are the things influencing me right now outside of me? And then how can I make the best choice going forward? So yeah, we see increase usually in confidence, creativity heightens because kids are less worried, less anxious, less scared, right? They're not like at a loss for what's going on around them. They know what's going on, and they can take confident action forward, feeling empowered instead of victimized by their experience.
Yeah. And their nervous systems are in balance and in tune, right? And so, we talk about self-awareness skills for kids, but it's important for parents too, to practice these self-awareness techniques and to be consciously aware of, when you are experiencing, this stress, and then seeing how it could be reflecting on to your children as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of times what we'll see too is what I see in my practice is parents who are like, I know this is important for my kid, but I don't actually know how to teach it. Like, I'm still developing this skill myself because it's, it's something that is just coming into vogue more and more. And so I'm just trying to learn how to be mindful myself. And I don't feel like I have the skills to teach it to my child yet, but they need it now, you know?
Yeah. And they're kind of learning through observation, especially in those early years before the age of 7 or 8. They're just really observing their environment in that theta brainwave state, and they're picking up everything that mom, dad, teachers, siblings, peers are all kind of showing them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, and again, in that stage too, like like the language is so important, right? And if we are just mindful in our language for that age, there's so much value in helping them with the interpretation, right? Like you're saying, they're picking it all up, and we can help them kind of describe and understand the world in a really empowering way, or we can leave them kind of floundering to figure out what it is and what's going on. But if we're mindful about our communication, there's so much we can do to set them up for success later.
Absolutely. So you talk about the 3 keys of mindfulness. Can you go into detail about those?
Yeah. So again, that's the idea of knowing what's going on inside of you. And this is where if we teach kids to tune in, right? And this is a lot of parents find that when they, a child is really expressing emotion strongly, or, they're just acting out. And a lot of times parents are like, I don't want to give more attention to that because it will grow, right? It will get bigger. And that's where a lot of times it diffuses it. If we can give attention to it and help kids sort what is going on inside of you right now, like they have a language for it. They have the ability to kind of like sort through potential solutions for it. So if we're giving them the space to have the experience without denying the experience, right? Like we don't want to say, well, you shouldn't be that frustrated about it. You just got to play with that toy yesterday.
Yeah.
Right. Because then we're cutting them off from their experience, and we don't want to do that. And so again, like, I'm so glad we're diving into these in more detail, because when we honor their experience and give them permission to feel what they're feeling and then know how to work with it, like it's a totally different ballgame, right? Because all of a sudden, instead of saying like, they're left feeling like, okay, but I'm still feeling, just because you told me not to feel frustrated doesn't mean it went away, and especially those kids that feel stuff super deep. Like they're still going to be feeling it next week. Right. I mean, they're not just going to let it go because they can't, because you told them to. So acknowledging their experience in that moment and really helping them get comfortable or get accustomed to figuring it out. One of the ways I like to help parents do this is there are some great pillows out there that are like a feeling wheel. And so like in a room where a kid might be for a tantrum, just having one of those pillows there where there's a feeling wheel, and they can look at it. There are versions of that feeling wheel that have, the internal felt sense of the emotion. So it might say like tight tummy, or it might say like want to hit. And then it's, it has a little arrow out to what emotion that usually is connected with. And so it really,
I love that. I feel like some adults could use a feeling wheel.
Totally. Yeah. It really gives kids permission to feel what they're feeling. And then as parents, we have to remember that when we give them permission, it doesn't make the emotion worse. What it does, it empowers them to know what to do with it. So I love Dr. Becky's explanation of this. She's like, I want parents to feel like the world of emotion is a big park with a whole bunch of benches, and your child is going to learn to sit on each of those benches, that represents an emotion throughout their lives. And the question is, can you sit on the bench with them?
Yeah.
And a lot of times as parents with the more uncomfortable emotions, it can be challenging.
And hold that space. Yeah.
We want them to like get off the bench. Like, don't sit on that one, right? Yeah. Especially when we have a high degree of empathy ourselves, we go there with them, and then we feel it too. And so it can be challenging to sit on the bench. But that first step of mindfulness, that first key is just being willing, right? To go there, go with their, whatever their felt sense is right now, and sit there with them in it and help them kind of figure out what it is. And then, we'll get to the third key, which is what to do with it. Yeah. So the second key being knowing what's going on around them. And that's where, again, as parents, we have to be really gentle with ourselves, because sometimes we're the instigator of their frustration.
Very true.
Right?
Very true.
Like we've set a boundary, or we've said something that's made them mad, or we asked them to take out the trash, whatever it is, we've asked for something and the child is responding to that. And so, and so when the child says, I'm so angry because you didn't ask my brothers to take out the trash, but you asked me and I was in the middle of playing a game. Like as parents in that moment, we can lose it, right? Like we could get angry and be like, just take out the trash,
because that frustration, it's like that pressure cooker of emotions bubbles up, but yet our children are experiencing that too.
Yeah. And so the ability to be able to hold space again for their interaction with us is that second key. Like, can you hold space for them to articulate how the friction between you is really bugging them? And can you do that in a way that helps you both move forward instead of kind of like spinning in it and, getting in a fight over it?
It's like learning the art of the pause, and we can utilize that in many ways, right?
Totally. That's a great way of putting it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so as parents too, we're not always accustomed to taking a high level view of what's going on. One of the other ways that I explain this is like, it's kind of like like a crayon factory. If you've ever toured a crayon factory, you know, there's like this high walkway where you see like the wax getting mixed, and you see the coloring getting added, and you see the crayons getting poured into the molds, and you see, you know, so you see all the different things. And this like zooming out, this what's going on around me is kind of like being up on that catwalk and watching all the different things all at once and saying like, okay, you are tired right now. You know, like you didn't sleep good last night because you had that bad dream. And so you're feeling really tired, and that's going to make you feel really frustrated, and it's going to make it hard for you to handle big emotions right now. You could say like, you know, you just got home from school and it looks like you didn't finish your snack yet. So maybe also you're a little bit hungry. Yeah, exactly. And so sometimes when we're hungry, it can be hard for us to keep our emotions, like know what to do with them also. And it can make it so we're very irritated, and it's easy for things to bother us, you know, and we can say, I know, you know, you're worried about the piano recital that you have tonight. And so that might be another reason that you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed right now. And so all those things together, you know, each one of those things would cause stress for you, but all those things together, that's a lot of stress for you right now. So let's just make sure that we understand, like, you're frustrated, you're angry, and also there are some key reasons why your anger is higher than it might usually be right now. And so then that's that second key, like help them see. And as parents, again, we might have to practice looking around, because a lot of times we're busy, we're just trying to like get stuff done. And we don't always take a step back and say like, okay, let me look at each of these different parts of my kid. Like, how's their physical health, their mental, you know, what are the things that are weighing on them right now? You know, just have a fight with a friend, or the bus driver was mean, or, you know, all those things add up. And again, kids are learning resilience, right? And so they don't have the capacity that we have to manage the stress yet. And so this is our chance to just guide them in recognizing it. And then again, that third step is knowing what to do with it. So knowing all of that. So right now, if you're feeling so angry and I still need the trash taken out, but we've recognized that you're kind of worn out and a little bit tired, and you need to finish your snack. What do you think would be helpful? Would it be helpful to wait a minute and finish your snack and just kind of take a minute and then take out the trash? You know, and a lot of times kids will come up with ideas if we let them, and they come up with some really great stuff, you know?
Yeah.
So go ahead.
It's so funny, Lindsay, because everything that you're explaining, when I worked with grieving families, this is exactly the same concepts that we would make sure that their basic survival needs were met. You know, are you hungry? Are you thirsty? Do you need rest? These are all very similar steps in just basic human survival before we can even handle what's emotionally coming at us. So I love this, because these key steps that you're talking about can really apply to any age group, whether it's from children all the way up to the elderly. It's really just making sure that we are filling those basic needs first before we tackle, you know, what's next, a bigger emotion like you had talked about.
Yeah. I love that example that you shared. And I think that in terms of stress, like it looks a little different, right? The context, but the impact on us is very similar, you know, like in different stressful situations. And so, like you said, in moments of grief, in, you know, moments where our adrenals are, you know, asked to be on high alert because we're under duress for a long period of time, like those times we're going to need similar things, right? And we're going to need the kind of care that is intentional, you know, in a way that gets us forward without draining us of, you know, our resources. And then also just the emotional awareness that comes during those times, it's a lot of times deeper, right? And during grief or during high stress situations than, you know, everyday moments. So it's going to take skill and time to cultivate. And that's where I think too, it's important to be patient. Because a lot of times, like as easy as it sounds to do 3 things, right? The process itself, and I'm sure you saw this in your time with grief counseling, like the process itself is really involved, and it takes time to cultivate those skills. And so not beating ourselves up when it doesn't come naturally or easily, or the third time we try it, or, you know, whatever, just being super patient with ourselves and engaging with it as a process more than an end result.
Absolutely. So is there an age range to teaching children mindfulness? How young can you teach kids these tools?
Yeah. So you brought it up a minute ago in terms of the things they're soaking up when they're little. I think energetically we can teach them when they're, newborns, when they're in the womb. Because the way we approach life and kind of the energy that we hold and bring about, that's going to influence them when they're little. I am such a big proponent of giving them the language. Like when your tiny toddler is throwing something, like, oh, you're feeling really angry right now. And letting anger just be a part of their vocabulary, or you seem really tired, or it seems like you are so happy to see your friend. I loved seeing you at the park with your friend today. Just again, giving them the language. As they get a little bit older, we start to help them develop awareness around their emotional state. So instead of us pointing it out, we help them like, what do you think you're feeling right now? What does that feel like in your body? So they might say like, I'm feeling super overwhelmed. And you can start to say, okay, what does that feel like in your body? And sometimes that can help diffuse it and get them out of their head, and in kind of a little more grounded. But it also helps them start to associate physical sensation with emotion, which is going to lead to like more awareness down the road.
Yeah.
That when they're a little bit older, we start to troubleshoot and say like, okay, if you're feeling really frustrated and you're feeling kind of stuck there, what are some of the ways that help you get out of frustration? And so we start to leverage that awareness that we've been cultivating in ways that help them, function more optimally. And then in their teenage years, again, we're going to have that like heightened emotion, kind of like with toddlers, right? And their brains are developing in a different way. Stuff's kind of unplugging and replugging back in. And so they're going to need a lot of the same patience. They're going to need a lot of the same, just like understanding that we had with them when their emotions were going wild when they were tiny. And then we're also going to want to help them leverage that emotional awareness in relation to other people, because that's like a primary goal that they have at that age, right? Is to connect. And so we want to help them understand, if they're feeling anger, is it because someone's treating you unkindly? Is it because, is someone like crossing a boundary for you? And so giving them, again, that's why we give them permission to feel what they're going to feel, because we want them when they're 14, 15, 16 to be angry if someone is not treating them appropriately, right? Like we want them to understand what it feels like to be anxious around someone, because that might be a sign that that's not the best person for them to be around, right? But helping them sort through those signals, it's super important in those years, because as they develop those relationships, so many of those emotions are going to come to play in a really heightened way in those relationships. And we want to be able to, again, sit on the bench with them, like be there for it and guide them through it.
Yeah, gosh, it'd be interesting to see 20, 30, 40 years down the road, having taught children. And I like how you said, I'm visualizing mom and dad, mom pregnant and mom and dad practicing mindfulness, like you said, in the womb, because it is an energy the child is picking up on mom and dad's stress prior to even being conceived, let alone born, right? And so it'd be interesting to see down the road these tools and techniques playing a role in having to go back and heal all these inner childhood wounds that many of us have had to dive into and to heal. Because if we teach children at a very young age to be able to process these emotions, to be able to use the words, to be able to kind of have a deeper understanding of the emotion associated with how it feels in the body, we wouldn't have so much trauma, right? As adults, that we wouldn't have to go back and really dive deep into those childhood emotions that we just didn't process, way back when we were 4, 5, 6 years old, right? So it's like, these are tools that can change generational patterns. These are things that can help heal on a very deep cellular level. And, teaching children as young as we can go, teaching parents, allowing parents to utilize these techniques within themselves. So, what are some fun and simple ways to practice mindfulness that parents and children can do these tools together?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked, because this is my favorite.
Because I know you have some.
No, my favorite thing is coming up with ways to make mindfulness fun for kids, because I totally agree with you. And it's one of the reasons I focused my practice on kids, because I was teaching adults and kids. And I was like, for adults, it just takes a long time to reset that patterning,
Program,
right? Yeah, Yeah. But for kids, I mean, they can make a switch quick. And then it's like their foundation is mindfulness, right? And like you said, they build on that for the rest of their lives. And it offers them a level of resilience and awareness that as adults, a lot of us are like, man, if only I'd had that,
I know. I think of that all the way back. I'm like, if I had that in kindergarten, or if I learned how to deal with anxiety all the way back to my childhood, who would I be today?
I know. And we're all strong, we're all strong and resilient souls, so we can figure it out. But yeah, anyway, I love teaching it to kids in fun ways because it has such a high impact and it's quick, like compared to trying to sort it out 40 years down the road. So the empathy flashlight is the first one. So this was the one I definitely wanted to share with your listeners because empathy is a big deal. And there are some kids who have not a lot of empathy, right? Like the empathy comes, it's hard for them to come by. They have more of a focus on themselves. And so empathy for them is something that they're trying to cultivate. But for a lot of kids, empathy is something that is like their go-to state. And that's where I think a lot of times we get kids who get burned out and they run into trouble because they're just exhausted and overwhelmed from taking in the emotions of everyone and everything around them. And so the empathy flashlight works for both types of kids. I'm going to illustrate it for the empathetic kids first. So for the kids with a high degree of empathy, we talk about how I just use a little finger light because kids love those and they're super fun. And then we talk about this as your empathy flashlight. So just like any flashlight, if your batteries are on all the time and your light flashlight's on all the time, what's going to happen?
It's going to burn out.
It's going to burn out, right? And so it's important for you to have sometimes where you practice turning, your empathy off. And that's not a skill I learned
like
until
a faucet.
Yeah. It's not a skill I learned until probably like my mid 30s, right?
I mean, girl, me too.
Being able to like boundary that empathy.
I'm still learning.
Right. But for kids, and again, it's a practice, right? It's not like, oh, you have a flashlight. Now all of a sudden you can turn off your empathy. But it's like, okay, what are some signs that your empathy flashlight is starting to have a low battery? What are some of the signs that your empathy flashlight has been on too long? And for some kids, it's overwhelm, right? Some kids, they just feel like a level of exhaustion in their body. Or some kids, you see their emotions are just like all over the place because they can't, like it's just too much to process. So we help them figure out like, what are the signs that your empathy flashlight is on? Usually it's, for the empathetic kids, it's on a lot. So they're like, I notice my mom's upset. And then my dad comes home and he's stressed from work. And then my brother's yelling and he's mad at my sister. And, like they know all the things that are going on.
Picking up on it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so when we start to help them articulate, we say like, okay, that's a lot, right? Like that's a lot of things to have to work with. So are there any ways you can turn your flashlight off for a minute? Are there any things that need your attention right now? And for a lot of times kids, they can tune out of a lot of that stuff, right? As adults, sometimes we aren't able to in the same way because we have to kind of manage it. But for a kid, going to their room for a minute, I love having like a calm down corner. So a space where there's maybe like yoga mat, a little cushy, a cushion somewhere, stuffed animals that are comforting. So with kids, we'll make a list. So when your empathy flashlight feels like the batteries are very low and it's been on a lot, what are some ways you can recharge it? And so then we'll talk about how they can just kind of get back into their own body, in their own head, in their own space. And a lot of times that looks like needing some time on their own or just with like one parent, and sometimes it looks like being willing to let other people argue because the empathetic kids tend to like try to keep everybody happy, right? Yeah. Help wherever they can. Yeah. So sometimes it's like, if the parent is trying to break up a fight, then the empathetic child is really stressed. Like, okay, that's a sign that your empathy flashlight is on in a space when maybe you can turn it off. So you going somewhere else and not having to sit there and witness the fight, but letting yourself just go take care of yourself somewhere else. That can be really helpful. For kids who don't have a high degree of empathy, we use the empathy flashlight like kind of a conflict resolution. So if they have a conflict with a sibling or with a parent, we say like, okay, let's get our empathy flashlight out. Let's shine it on you first. What's going on with you right now? What are you feeling? What's, what instigated this argument? And then they can kind of go through what is wrong, how they got frustrated or what they feel like the injustice is. And they say, okay, let's shine the flashlight on your brother. Why do you think your brother got upset? Why do you think he's angry right now? And then, they'll go through why, and sometimes they'll nail it. Sometimes they know, sometimes they're frustrated and they don't want to talk about it. And you can kind of just guide like, okay, I'm going to shine the empathy flashlight on your brother for a second. To me, it seemed like, he thought you were done with the toy. And so he didn't think it would be a problem for him to play with it. And that made you really angry because you weren't done with the toy. So how can we move forward from this? Like if he thought you were done and you weren't, did you tell him that you weren't done? Because that's what he thought. And usually, we can just communicate if we can have like our wits about us at that point. Sometimes this empty flashlight has to come out, 10 minutes later when people are settled.
Yeah, after the tantrum.
Yeah. But if a lot of times there can be understanding, right? So for the next conflict, there's going to be another conflict, right? For sure with siblings. But for the next conflict, maybe we've cultivated a bit of understanding that will come in handy.
I need this empathy flashlight for my sibling.
Yeah. So maybe next time next time, could you ask me if I'm done with this before you take it? And then, maybe the brother's like, yes, I could ask that, and maybe you have a little less conflict. There are moments, again, kids are kids. And so they're going to have conflict. And so there are moments you're going to use this and you're going to be like, is it even working? Is this even, is there a point to this? But we're in it for the long game, right? And the self-awareness, and kids, again, have to learn and process these kinds of interactions multiple times in order for them to kind of sink in. So giving them the opportunity to do that, it can be really helpful. Another fun way that I like to teach it is with my brain with glasses. So a lot of times kids will feel like the emotion really strongly such that they can't let it go, right? Like they're kind of stuck and it's gripping them. And so we'll say like, does your brain have its angry glasses on right now? And if your brain has its angry glasses on, it's going to be angry about everything, right? Like you're just going to see everything and it's like red, right? You're going to see everything through this lens of anger. And so there's not going to be anything that feels happy or fun or whatever to you because you're angry right now. Your brain has its angry glasses on. And so again, giving kids a language, that's a normal process, right? Sometimes anger takes hold and it takes 5 to 7 minutes for it to dissipate. Sometimes it's longer. And so if we give kids a way to understand what's going on, like, okay, the idea now is to go back to clear, right? So what are some of the ways that we move from this angry at everything back to clear so you can see everything clearly? And then I have, there are yellow lenses for anxiety, like you're feeling really nervous. There are blue lenses for sadness. You're stuck in your sad glasses. And so as we give kids tools to help their brain change its glasses, we can start to help them see like, it's not me personally, like I'm not in trouble because I'm angry. It's just like, this is an emotional state I'm in right now. And the level of neutrality that we can give them with tools like this can help them kind of, again, take that big picture view, be up on the catwalk at the crayon factory, being like, what is going on here? Where is the disconnect? Like what process is out of whack and how can I start to resolve it?
And I love how you associate color with it, because I've actually done a few shows on the healing benefits of color. And I think it's important to be able to, kind of correlate emotions with color, and everybody sees color differently, and we all associate different emotions with color. And that's important because that is using both right and left hemispheres of the brain. So it's really just activating those neurotransmitters on a deep cellular level. And that also in tune will calm their central nervous system. So it's like, even on a deeper level, for them, it's fun because they get to wear these glasses and, play with the different colors, but really it's doing something on a deep cellular level or even a subconscious level.
I love that.
That's so neat. So Lindsay, this has been a very interesting conversation. Is there anything else that you'd like to share or that you think would be of benefit to the listeners that maybe we haven't touched on?
I think that, again, like the process part of it is important, right? Because sometimes we can get accustomed to having quick solutions. The world that we live in, the modern world we live in, there's a lot of stuff that's just snappy, right? Like we can have access to like quick interventions. And while mindfulness is a quick intervention, it takes time to change the brain. So, I mean, you just brought it up right now. In the ways that we're trying to make changes, they're in fundamental, like, like neural connections. And so when we're working on that level, it does take time for things to change. And so parents not giving up quick if they don't see results, I tell parents 6 to 12 months, we're going to see improvement after 3. We're going to see things start to sink in at 6. And then by 12, it's going to become something that's just natural to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so being able to see small benchmarks along the way is important, and kind of getting when I work with families, what we'll do is we'll say, like, how will we know this is getting better? What are going to be some of the signs that emotional regulation is starting to come online for your child? What are going to be some of the signs that relationally they're more comfortable or that they feel more confident? How are we going to know? And so when we see those small things along the way, it can be really encouraging because we're like, okay, we're on the right track, right? Like this is moving in the right direction, and we've stopped. Yeah. Like we've stopped like imploding over here, and we're starting to move. So I think encouraging parents to just see the small baby steps of improvement is important. And then really focusing on the end goal also, which is having kids who are more flexible. They can adapt, right? They have the ability to be kind of stable and steady in their emotional and mental space. And then having kids who can really just feel energized. They're excited about life and engaged in a way that it has a lot of meaning because it's connected to who they are and what's important to them, because they know what their emotions are. They can connect to those things, right? Yeah. Instead of having it be really externally motivated, they have an intrinsic motivation that's really beautiful, and an intrinsic sense of resilience that's beautiful. And I mean, there are so many, as parents, we all want that for our child, right?
Yeah.
So engaging with the practice of mindfulness over time, while it does take patience, and it does like manifest progress in tiny ways, keeping an eye on those big goals can sometimes help us stay motivated to keep with it. Cause we're like, yes, definitely. If I can teach you resilience while you're in my home and you can leave my home with that skill, like there's nothing more important to me than that.
Absolutely. And it's mindfulness and resilience is kind of contagious a little bit when you're around someone who has that energy of being able to hold space, who is calm and, who's resilient. I know for me, it's like I've had guests like you, for example, and the guest I just had the other day, Bijou, I could feel just that sense of calmness, and it just started to calm my energy too. And it felt really nice to be in that energy. It's like, because if you have a high energy child and you teach them this mindfulness, it'll give them kind of a new way of approaching their stress and their anxiety versus just reacting to things rather quickly, versus just kind of being able to sit back and allow things to happen versus having to react all the time. Where, had I had those skills when I was a child, it would have been, I think I'd have a lot easier 20s, teens and 20s had I had those skills.
Yeah. Definitely.
Proactive versus reactive, right? So, so Lindsay, tell us a little bit about your services and how people can connect with you.
Yeah. So I work with kids one-on-one. We just meet for 30 minutes on Zoom each week. I send them something in the mail, and we go over, different ways that the activity applies in their life. So for example, this week in my coaching, I sent Orbeez to the kids, and we talked about how there are a lot of thoughts and emotions rolling around in our heads, and we get to focus on the one that we want to pay the most attention to. So while there might be a lot of things rolling around in there, we can, articulate what each of them is and then choose which Orby we're going to pull out, So anyway, we'll go through. So in your life, what are some of the thoughts rolling around in your head? And we go through different activities like that to, again, just help them practice self-awareness, get the language around emotion and things like that. So it ends up being, 6 to 12 months that we'll work together. And then by the end, we're again seeing the progress come, and we're seeing just changes in the way that they engage with the world. I have one little client I'm working with right now, and we've been together for almost a year. And the other day she said, I'm not afraid to try new things anymore because I'm working with you. And she had gone through, a phase where she post-COVID, she'd had a really hard time trying new things at all, engaging in social settings with friends, like doctor's appointments, anything. And it was just like some circumstances got in her way, and then her worries got bigger than what she could manage. And so as we've increased her ability to manage worry, she's gotten so much more adventurous, and she's willing to try, she's like going on big rides, going on water slides, driving jet skis, and she just is flourishing in such a fun way to see. So that's the kind of thing that we work toward, is like the full expression of the child in a way that isn't bound by worry or, emotion.
You've got to think that 12-month time frame of COVID, when we were all in lockdown, that was a subconscious program, right? Sure. So it's like having to go back and reprogram children and people, even myself. It's, after all that lockdown, I got real comfortable being alone and being in my own space. Mm-hmm. And then it was a little, I had to retrain myself to get back out into the world again, let alone our children too, being very disconnected from their friends. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So so that's the kind of work that I do. And
is there an age range that you work with?
5 to 18.
Okay.
So it's obviously different, and the conversations are different for each age, but it's fun to see, as long as they can be on Zoom, it's all on Zoom. Right. And so as long as they can be on Zoom, then we can make it happen. But so that's the coaching that I do. And then I have my podcast called The Stress Nanny, and people are happy, welcome to tune in there. Happy to have them join along. And my website is thestressnanny.com, and you can reach out about coaching there. You can find links to the podcast there. The podcast is also available anywhere you get your podcasts.
That's great. So all of you out there listening, check out Lindsay's website, thestressnanny.com. Check out her podcast, Stress Nanny. Lindsay, I appreciate you coming on the show today. I appreciate your positive attitude. I can feel that childlike energy just exuding from you. And I got to say, I'm kind of jealous a little bit. You get to work with kiddos all the time, because, I don't have children myself, but I'm always the fun aunt. And I really enjoy the energy that children bring into the world. And I do feel that as adults, we need to tap into that a little bit more. And so thank you so much for teaching our children, our younger generations, mindfulness. This is going to be a beautiful ripple effect that is going to go out and bless the world. So thank you so much for all that you're doing in the world.
Oh, thank you, Tanya. I appreciate being able to be on the show. And I'm also grateful for your work. I think the ability to live fully, and to leverage our gifts and the skills that we have, that maybe as we were younger, we didn't see as skills, but more as vulnerabilities,
I agree.
So important to reframe those. And I'm so grateful for the work you're doing in that regard.
Thank you. We're powerful little kids that we have to relearn that, right?
You deserve to navigate your life as an empath in alignment with health, happiness, and abundance. To learn more about the services that I provide, including Beyond Quantum Healing Hypnosis, EFT tapping, and the Emotion Code, visit my website at www.thesoulcafe.org.